The American Legion believed then, as it does now, that Scouting is a valuable program for developing boys into men of high moral characters. Our next guest is a native of San Juan Bautista, California. He earned the rank of Eagle Scout as a youth. As the 11th Chief Scout Executive, he provides vision and direction to staff members and volunteers, including 1,100 National Council employees, 5,800 local council employees, and almost 1.2 million adult volunteers serving more than 2.7 youth across the nation. Please welcome Chief Scout Executive of the Boy Scouts of America, Bob Mazzuca.
Good morning, and thank you. Thank you very much. What an honor it is to be here at this great convention with this great organization. As you just heard, we've been partners since 1919 when you were first started, just 9 years after the Boy Scouts of America. And I'm pleased to tell you that today, in 2012, 2,551 scout units, packs, troops, posts, and crews across the country are chartered to Legion posts. 53,952 youth members are in those posts, and we cherish that relationship, and we always have, especially in these times when it's great to have the American Legion have your back. It truly is, trust me. Let me just start by saying welcome to the second century of scouting in America. In 2010, most of you know, we had our 100th anniversary, our centennial year. And as this was approaching, we had an opportunity. We could have baked a cake, and on February 8th, the birthday of the Boy Scouts, had the obligatory black tie gala in Washington and stood around and sang "Happy Birthday, Boy Scouts" and talk about the good old days. Or we could use the occasion of our centennial to what I like to say was reintroduce scouting to the American people, because you see, for well over a decade, we had allowed ourselves to be defined by others. We'd allowed ourselves to be co-opted by others for other agendas, kind of a bunker mentality. And I really believed it was time to reintroduce scouting to the American people, because a whole generation of Americans have wondered where the Scouts went. And so we took advantage of that, and starting with New Year's Day at the Tournament of Roses parade, the first Boy Scout float in that parade in 65 years. Ending on Thanksgiving Day at the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade in New York, and everything in between in the capstone, our 100th anniversary jamboree at Fort A.P. Hill in Virginia. And what a marvelous celebration that was, and it began the dialogue again about the great role that scouting plays in American society. It's a great time to be in scouting, and in my humble opinion, and I'm going to tell you this as a private citizen almost, I've been working for the Boy Scouts of America for 42 years. We have a mandatory retirement age of 65 for the CEO, and I turned 65 yesterday, so I'm on my way out, day after tomorrow, to the land of retirement. But I say this with all my heart and my humble opinion. In this great nation, the United States of America, it has never been more important for scouting to deliver what it delivers to communities across America than it is today. And the slippery slope that we're on, the dearth of leadership and leadership with integrity, children facing perils that none of us ever thought of, it's absolutely critical that we stay the course. And I'm going to share a couple of perspectives with you on that thought. You know, when Dr. Richard Carmona was our Surgeon General, and there's a great story in itself, what a great man. When he was our Surgeon General, he testified before a committee of Congress, and a colleague of mine invited me to read that testimony, and I did, and it scared me to death. Dr. Carmona was a brilliant man. He said a lot of things that are way above my pay grade. He was a doctor. But he said something to this distinguished committee that really caught my attention when he said, in his opinion, we're on the verge of the first generation in our history to be less healthy and likely to live fewer years than their parents. Now think about that for a minute. Let me repeat that. Dr. Carmona said to this committee of Congress that we're on the verge of the first generation in our history to likely to be less healthy and live fewer years than their parents. Now, what kind of an aspiration as a society is that for us? The sedentary lifestyle of kids today, we can't even choose up a team of kickball on the playground anymore because somebody might get chosen last, and that'll be bad for their self-esteem. We learned in the Scouts a long time ago that if somebody's going to get chosen last, you let them do the choosing, but you still play the game. The game's very important. Physical activity today is at an all-time low for young people. And as a private citizen, I ask you the question, this kind of a question, what does that have to do with scouting? We'll get to that in a minute, but just think about it. Those of us who are in the business of employing people to help us deliver our goods or services, if Dr. Carmona's prophecy is true, where are we going to find that workforce that will come and give us a day's work for a day's pay with a good old American work ethic to help keep us competitive in this global marketplace that we're in today? If his prophecy is true, how are we going to pay for it? We can't figure out how to pay for the healthcare issues we have today. If Dr. Carmona's prophecy is true, what does 20 years from now look like? 30 years, 50 years from now? And one of the things that I've undertaken in this journey to reintroduce scouting to the American people is I travel all the time. I averaged over the last 5 years over 200 nights a year in a hotel. Mr. Marriott and I are on a first-name basis. And one of the ironies of this is one of my great joys is traveling through some of America's great airports. That sounds like an oxymoron, but once you get past security and get inside, it's a pretty nice experience because in every airport in America, you see these wonderful young American men and women either coming home from or on their way to deployment to defend those freedoms that we take so for granted so often. And if Dr. Carmona's prophecy is true, where will we find those fine young Americans that will continue to go to far-flung places and stand for the freedoms and the liberties that every human being deserves? So what's that got to do with scouting? It's got everything to do with scouting. We own the outdoors. We still know how to climb a tree and place steel to bacon in a relatively unstructured way. We can challenge young people to become the very best they're capable of becoming, and we do it in a physical way in God's great outdoors, and we teach young people that it's more fun to get to the top of the mountain with your buddies than by yourself. That to become a true leader, you reach back and help people along the way. Scouting, the Boy Scouts of America and its 292 councils across the country own 983 camping properties. When the mayor of Indianapolis wakes up in a cold sweat in the middle of the night and wants to know what to do about the plight of children in Indianapolis, I want he or she to first think to call the Boy Scouts, because we have a solution, or a partial solution, or we can help get kids back into the great out of doors. STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. With the help of ExxonMobil, we launched an initiative 2 years ago, created the NOVA and Supernova Awards to bring children of America back to the notion that science, technology, engineering, and math are important. It's embarrassing and it's fearful and frightful that we have fallen so precipitously in the world in producing scientists, engineers, and mathematicians. 21st in the world in math. Our rightful place is at the top, and we need to help get there, and scouting will do that with your help. And I just kind of want to wrap all that up with the notion that while we have these national challenges that are relatively large and relatively ominous, I kind of look at it this way. Nothing defines a scout or a scouter. How many scouts in the room? How many Eagle Scouts in the room? God bless you all. Nothing defines a scout or a scouter better than those 12 magic words of the Scout Law. Trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. As a matter of fact, in my opinion, there's no greater compliment in the world than to have somebody come up to you and say, "You're such a Boy Scout." That's the greatest compliment you can have. It's awesome. Nothing defines us better than that. But it's like anything else we do in life. To get good at it, what do you have to do? Somebody shout it out. To get good at anything, what do you have to do? Practice. Now that's the rule of, for me it works for everything but golf. No matter what I do, I can't get any better at golf. But practice is how it works, and so here's how it works. On Tuesday evening down at the Legion Hall that sponsors that scout troop, a young man shows up for his very first meeting. 11 years old, scared to death, and an older boy takes him over in a corner and gets him side by side with those words and said, "Here, kid, memorize these." What do you mean memorize these? This isn't school. Trust me, it's important. And so he does. He begins to memorize the Scout Oath and the Scout Law. And after a few weeks, he can recite those words because he was told to memorize them, and then to get his next little badge, he has to. But that's not the important thing. Here's where the practice comes in. On a Saturday morning, they gather up at the Legion Hall, and they go out into the community, and they hang bags on the doors in the neighborhood for the food drive. The next week, they go and they pick them up, and they take them down to the food pantry. And that young man who hands that bag of food to that volunteer in the food pantry sees the joy in his or her eyes and begins to feel, not just theorize, but feel what it feels like to help other people at all times. And do that enough over the course of a scouting career, and all of a sudden that little chromosome is embedded in the DNA to help other people at all times. And then about a year later, at that same Legion Hall, this boy gets elected as a patrol leader. Uh-oh, the dog just caught the car. Because now there's 7 other boys that are dependent on him to make good decisions. And over the course of his tenure as that patrol leader, he'll make some good ones and he'll make some bad ones, but he'll learn a lot about being a servant leader. He'll learn a lot about the art of leadership. And then he becomes the troop scribe, and then the quartermaster, and then the senior patrol leader. An entire troop is dependent upon him to lead them to the top of the mountain. And at the end of the day, at the end of that boy's journey, embedded is another chromosome called leadership. Called leadership. And you know, this same troop one weekend is going to go off to a camporee sponsored by the council and camp with all the other kids in the council. They're going to have a lot of fellowship and a lot of fun, a lot of scout skills games, and on Sunday they're going to go to a scout's own service over on the mountaintop right about sunrise. And in his own faith tradition, he will be honoring God, but he'll look around him and see all of the other faith traditions doing the same thing. And certainly his love and respect for his God gets stronger, but so does his respect for the faith traditions of others. And I would submit that that's a pretty good thing. So at the end of this boy's journey, starting in a partnership with the American Legion, down in the hall down the corner, several years later, off the conveyor belt comes a young man who now has embedded in his DNA novel notions like service, duty to God and country, leadership, and respect for others. I'd say that's a pretty good product coming off that assembly line. Wouldn't be possible to do. Thank you. The Boy Scouts of America could not do that alone. But in partnership with this marvelous organization called the American Legion, and dozens of others across the country, we change lives every day. And whether that young man becomes a postman or the president, he's going to be a decent, adult, human American citizen that's in it for the common good and in it for the right thing. He's going to be embodied and fulfilled with integrity and honor, respect for flag, respect for God, respect for motherhood, and all those things that are passé today. And I thank you for allowing us to work together this entire last century to produce young Americans like that. God bless you, God bless the American Legion, and God bless this country. Thank you very much.